Thank you, Josh. So my story begins actually in Denver, Colorado. It's where I was born and raised. And I grew up with just an intense passion for nature. Like, I was always outside. I always loved to catch animals and study them. And I got really into keeping fish tanks. I got a few tanks when I was a kid, and especially saltwater fish tanks. It really just became my passion. And I knew right after high school I had to go down to somewhere near the coast and study the ocean. So I chose South Florida here. Palm Beach Atlantic University was a perfect fit for me. And as soon as I got down here, that was about 10 years ago, I fell in love with this area. I went out snorkeling all the time off the beach, especially at the beach kind of right next to campus near the Breakers Hotel. And I just fell in love with this area, and I knew I wanted to stay here. So right before I graduated from PBA, I actually started working at Loggerhead Marine Life Center. And that place is actually a hospital that specializes in treating sick and injured sea turtles. And a good amount of our patients were turtles that came in and have some kind of wounds that were caused by a boat propeller. It's a very common thing down here, boat strikes on turtles and manatees, and it's a very deadly thing when it happens. About 90% of turtles hit by boats don't survive. So this is a picture of me working at Loggerhead. We're about to release this turtle. And the guy behind me in that picture is actually my coworker, Andy. Me and him started working in the same department there early on. And that now takes me to the week of Thanksgiving of 2019. So me and Andy really bonded over kind of both of our passions for fishing, snorkeling, diving, you name it. We were always outside. We always wanted to do something with fish. So we really bonded over that. And the week of Thanksgiving 2019, the report was it's going to be flat and clear all week. So I actually took that whole week off just to go out snorkeling and enjoy the water. So my fourth day in a row was actually Thanksgiving Day. And I went out with Andy that morning. And you can change the slide. So it's a little hard to see, but this is kind of an overview map of the Breakers Reef. It's the reef that I called my favorite, and it was essentially my happy place. I've been there hundreds of times. I love all the animals I see there. It's a really beautiful place if you guys haven't seen it yet. But basically, what me and Andy did that morning was my usual routine there. We'd park kind of just at that north tip of that little map there and walk down the beach to the Breakers Hotel. And you can kind of see that little stretch going parallel towards the beach. That's actually a pier that was destroyed by a hurricane a long time ago. That's a really good reef spot. So we'd always swim out kind of right there. And that was an especially beautiful day. We immediately saw a bunch of fish. We saw a few sharks, which is always really exciting. We saw some sea turtles, an octopus, you name it. We saw everything that day. It was just, this is especially beautiful day, and I was really taking in how much I love the water, how much close to God I feel when I'm out in the water and enjoying His creation out there. So about 3 hours into our dive, I was kind of at that north point of that map on the reef, and it was about noon, and we were both a little tired, and we decided to swim in for the day. So as soon as I started swimming into the beach, I heard a boat. And there's something you have to know about when you're underwater. Sound actually travels 5 times further than it does when you're in the air. So say if a bell rings at that side of the room, you would hear it, like any bell, but then just imagine underwater, that sound would sound 5 times closer to where you're sitting. So that day was a holiday, so there was a lot of boats out, so you could always hear kind of the whir of boat engines just all day. And they never really worried me because, I had a dive flag. I was doing all what I can do to stay safe. And the boats always kept their distance. They always knew what they were doing. And I heard this especially loud noise, and it really puzzled me because it was louder than any boat engine I've ever heard before. And I look to the north of me, and I see this massive hull of a boat heading straight towards me. So that second, this day turned into a beautiful day out on the water to a life or death situation. I only knew I had a few seconds to react to this massive boat heading straight towards me at a very fast speed. Thankfully, I knew the boat couldn't hit my head or my torso, or I wouldn't be here today. So what I did, God helped me make this maneuver. I just turned with my limbs facing where the boat was going to hit me, because at this point I had to brace for impact. There's no getting out of its way. And I braced for impact, and then the boat hit me. And the strike itself was very short. I don't really remember it, but I do remember the aftermath. The first thing I noticed was that my right arm was gone. I looked down and actually saw it sink down onto the reef. Still an image that I can clearly see in my head. And then afterwards, trying to process the shock of that, I noticed I couldn't swim anymore because both my legs had been severely cut open. My left leg kind of right under my knee, and then my right leg right at my knee. So I was in a ton of pain, and what I didn't even know at the time was this hand actually got hit too and was badly broken and bleeding, but I didn't even notice that at the time. All I could see in that moment was blood. The water around me was red. I was going under. I couldn't swim anymore. I was screaming for help. But I knew that moment was like, this is it. Like, all my life, I'm going to die here. Like, it led up to that point, and I've accepted the fact that I'm going to die here. It was a very hard thing to do, and a very emotional moment for me, and just all the sheer panic that set in, just knowing that you're in such a hopeless situation out in the water like that. And thankfully, kind of right before, I had a lot of water in my lungs, but right before I went under, Andy got to me, and he started holding me up. And then kind of right after that, a number of miracles started happening out there. So the first one was that the boat that hit me thankfully noticed what had happened, and they immediately turned around. They were calling 911. They had a first aid kit on the boat. So they were ready to help me out as soon as I could get onto the boat. So they pulled around, and then there was actually she was a stranger out there. Me and Andy did not know her. She was just paddleboarding that morning, but she was right next to me when the boat hit me. And that, about a week ago, she actually learned how to tie a tourniquet. So she was immediately in the water to help me. They got me to the boat. She tied a tourniquet around my arm and both of my legs. That moment right there saved my life, because at that moment I've probably lost about half of my blood. So I would have bled out right on the scene there, but thankfully she was there. And the boat started taking me into the beach. The ambulance was already at the beach. The first responders are ready to lift me up and take me, so the boat just had to take me to the beach. So this whole time I'm screaming, I'm going to die. Like, just the sheer panic of that kept setting in. I couldn't get over that pain and panic. And Andy was, right on top, like close to me, just trying to comfort me. And what's funny is me and him never really had many conversations about religion in our friendship. We kind of just had fun and went out fishing and just have fun. And that moment, like, I knew he kind of wasn't a believer in God, but he said the words that God is here right now, God is with us. And that moment, I changed from I'm going to die to I'm going to survive. I felt this uncontrollable peace come over me. I was just looking into the blue sky, and I saw the light and the comfort of the God I've known my whole life there with me that moment. And it was one of the most profound things that has ever happened to me. And Andy saw my reaction to those words. And from that moment forward, he knew without a doubt there was some kind of higher power, the God watching over me that day and that moment. Because after that, it was just determination to survive. I got to the beach, the paramedics lifted me up, got me into the ambulance, and ambulance, after a very long ride, I was able to tell them my parents' name and their phone number so they can contact them, because I knew my family had to know they all still lived in Denver. And I got there to the hospital, wheeled me into the surgery room, and that's kind of the moment I put it all in God's hands, because they were going to put me under for surgery, and I had no idea if I was going to wake up again, if I was going to have any legs when I woke up. I just knew for sure I lost this arm, but I had no idea really the damage that happened to my body. So this is the boat that hit me. You can stay on that last image. So this boat was a 36-foot yellowfin, extremely nice and fast boat. It was going about 45 miles an hour at the point with the GPS that I was hit at. So the fact that I even survived the initial impact was a miracle in itself. So I got to the hospital, and the police, the first responders, notified my family, who were in Colorado, about just leaving church after the Thanksgiving service. And it still breaks me every time to think about their reactions, hearing the news that their son was hit by a boat and that he might not make it out of surgery. He's for sure lost an arm. They have no idea how I'm going to recover or if I'm going to be alive the next day. But my parents made that journey down to Florida that Thanksgiving night, not knowing if I was going to be alive that morning. It's still a very heavy thing for me to talk about, and just how that impacted them is really just what just hurts me the most about this whole accident, just knowing how shocking that was to them. But they got down to Florida. I made it through the first surgeries, and the surgeons actually had to take a picture of my left wrist because they were in disbelief that the propeller, so it cut open my wrist, but it actually missed the central nerve to my hand. And if it would have hit that nerve, I wouldn't have had barely any movement in this hand, but it was just about less than a millimeter away from that. So now this hand, it feels perfectly normal. I can do pretty much anything with this hand. So I'm very grateful for that miracle. And also just the way the surgeons were able to repair me. You can go to the next picture now. This was me the first morning in the hospital. My right arm was badly infected. My knee was infected because when you get a lot of wounds in the water, there's a lot more bacteria that can get into them. So the infections were very bad and painful because of that. But when I woke up in the ICU about a week after the accident, kind of coming into terms with reality and remembering kind of what Andy said to me there that day, I just felt hope. I felt there's a reason I'm still alive. There's a reason I made it through this initial trauma, and I'm going to recover, and I'm going to use this situation to the best of what I can do. And I told my parents kind of that day in the ICU, right before going back into a surgery, that I can make more of a difference now than I could ever before this accident. And that's kind of been my mindset throughout my whole recovery. So in the hospital, I slowly relearned how to walk, very painfully. Slowly relearned how to use this wrist because it was very badly damaged, and also had to kind of mourn the loss of this arm and really think about how I was going to live my life with just one arm. If I wanted a prosthetic, if I could go back to work doing this, if I could do anything I love again, like fishing, diving. It was all up in the air. So about 2 months later, I finally got out of the hospital. You can change the slide now. This is me, wheeled out, big smile on my face, very happy to be out of there. And yeah, I came out of that hospital that day with a lot of hope. And the hope was that I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to recover from this. I'm going to get back to my normal life and show that, my field of work, I see all these sea turtles with horrible boat strike wounds, and I see other animals with horrible wounds, and I feel their struggle, I feel their story, and I just want to use the best of that to my advantage. So I got back to working at Loggerhead and kind of used my story as motivation for myself to keep working for marine life and keep working for ocean conservation. But as well as I found a few new passions in this. One of them was boating safety. From this accident, I wanted to make changes and some laws that could have prevented this accident from happening. So the boater, the driver of the boat, he was going very fast, 45 miles an hour, about 600 feet away from the beach, which is very, very close. So one of the things I try to encourage boaters or anyone out on the water is, if you're in a boat, just think about 1,000 feet off the beach. Anything closer than that, you want to be going at pretty much a no-wake speed. If you think of like any fishing pier, they're about 900 to 1,000 feet long. So if you think you're closer to the beach on a boat, even if you're riding on a boat and the driver's going really fast, you're close, just tell the driver, hey, either go out further from the beach or just kind of slow down, because there's a lot of people swimming around. There's a lot of marine life around the beach, and just to kind of protect them. And another law that I'm working on is basically the diver's down device that I had was a little two-dimensional dive flag. Some of you have probably used one before when you're out diving, but they're very two-dimensional, and if the boater's at the wrong angle, it can be a real challenge for them to see the flag. So I'm promoting more 3D dive buoys. I have a picture of this a little bit later in the slides that I'll show you. And eventually one day, as a life accomplishment, I would love to make that the new standard, the new law for divers down devices. But, so going back to the driver, I knew this was a day I would have to face because we're going to court, taking him. The state was, trying to charge him with a lot of things, and what I really wanted out of this is a story of forgiveness and a story of working together to make things better in this world, because we live in a world of reactions, of vengeance, of immediate justice, and I was really determined to go against that, even though at times that's not what I felt like doing. It was the right thing to do. And that day in court, it was actually just that week of Thanksgiving, a year from the accident. I've made a plea deal with him that he would help me create a video with FWC to encourage safe boating and use of good dive flags, as well as he's going to help me lobby to change these laws that I want to improve upon. And kind of after the whole court hearing, I walked up to him. This is the first time I've ever seen him in person. And he was very nervous about how I'd react. I was very nervous. But I felt, the presence of God with me, just like he's been with me through this whole experience. But that day in court, I walked up to him right afterwards. I just shook his hand and said, let's make a difference. I forgive you. And from that moment on, we've been working together. We've been trying to make our ocean safer, as well as sharing a story of forgiveness and redemption through just this horrible accident that happened. And then also I got back to doing the things that I love. So you can go to the next slide. This is me and Andy. We're back out snorkeling. I caught an iguana when we were snorkeling. And, it was like the olden days. We were having all the same fun we used to. You can go to the next picture now. And this is us back out fishing again. I have my prosthetic on, which I rarely ever wear now, because I've adapted to doing life so much with just one hand that having something on here is just really a hindrance to me. So, but we were fishing that day. I was using my prosthetic and felt like the olden days, made a few adjustments to how I fish and what I did. But after time and repetition, it felt normal. I can't imagine fishing with two hands now because I'm so used to fishing with one hand. And that's kind of how I want to, live my life, is that no matter what you do or what you choose in life, you're going to lose something. That's not a choice that you have. But the choice that you do have is you can take what happened to you and you can make it impact you in a negative way. You can make it kind of destroy who you are and dwell on the negativity, or you can make it define you in a positive way, which I've chose from right off the bat to make this define me in a positive way, no matter how hard it got. And I'm sticking with that. And I know, it's hard to not be frustrated about what happened to me sometimes. Some days are better than others. But I know with God, that God is with me, and he can see this through. It gives me strength, and it gives me the courage to move on and to tell this story and encourage other people through it. So I just have kind of a few closing things. About forgiveness, it truly comes from the heart. It's a very hard topic to talk about and explain, but kind of something I try to practice, and what I fall short of is daily forgiveness. If I can forgive a boating driver for doing this kind of damage to me, why do I not forgive everyone else for what they do? Like, sometimes I get frustrated about that, but I just got to remember to practice daily forgiveness. That's just kind of some advice I'll give to you guys, is just always try to practice in any life scenario, just kind of responding and not reacting to what has happened to you, because you can respond in such a positive way to something negative that's happened to you. And one last thing, so another thing I love to do was play piano. And it was one of my favorite things to do. My mom's a piano teacher, and I really found it as a way to worship God. And when I lost my right hand, I thought those days were over, and I was so sad about that because I loved piano, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But then, I looked up some YouTube videos of people playing with one hand. I'm like, well, I can still try and do this, even with one hand. So I gave that, the first time it was really frustrating. It was very, very hard on me to be just playing with one hand, but I just gave it more time and repetition, which that's a key phrase throughout my recovery, is just time and repetition. And it became so natural to me that, I love to play piano again now. And I'm going to play, actually, if You can change the slide one more over. This is back to the dive buoy. This is the buoy that I'm starting to kind of distribute and encourage, and I hope one day it will become a law. But basically, the piano, I started playing a lot, and there's this one hymn that was stuck with me throughout my recovery, and it is well. It's an older hymn, but it's really about overcoming grief and overcoming, just obstacles that will impact your life. So I'm just going to play that to close out my story here, and I'll have the lyrics on the screen just for you guys to kind of reflect upon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So I can close us in prayer now. Dear God, thank you for this group today, and thank you for always being there through our hardest times and never giving up on us. And I just pray that you will teach everyone to forgive and teach everyone that no matter what happens in life, that you can make the best of it and you can stay strong and remain faithful and overcome anything. In your name, amen.